Hang on, if you could sign that on the desk list.
I'm always told. Yes,
agendas.
Right. Sorry.
Everything going great?
Did you guys grab a copy of the presentation paper one? I can get a, let me get a copy. You got one? Copy of this.
Okay. We're going to call the meeting. We're going to call the meeting to order. It's 5:33. We'll use the sign-in sheet as our roll call. We're going to, if it's okay with this committee, we got quite a few things that needs to be done. What I'd like for us to do is to allow KRS to be moved to the front of the agenda so that they can give their presentation and we can move this along. So if that's okay, is that okay with the body? Great. So at this particular time, are there any public comments? Any public comments? No public comments? Great. So the first item on the agenda is a presentation by KRS, and that would be Ms. Stacy Wilkins, who will be giving us a presentation.
All right. Are we okay to come up here? I have the Hitchcock Design Group team with me as well. Is that okay?
That's fine.
Do you prefer me to speak into the mic? Okay. Very good. Oh, I don't want to do that. Okay. We'll kind of do that. Very good. Well, thank you all for having us. I'm going to introduce my team while we have the chance here. I'm Stacy Wilkin, here this evening in the capacity of the chairperson of the Kankakee Riverfront Society. With me here is Rick Hitchcock and Tim King, who are with the Hitchcock Design Group team. So we've got a lot of great information. We're going to throw a lot at you in a short amount of time. So bear with me. I do have a paper copy if anybody needs one yet. So let me know. But yeah, we're here, excited to be in person. Some of us haven't been in person with others in a long time, so we're really excited to be here tonight to talk about the East, we went the wrong way here, talk about the East River Walk. So I do want to say thank you to the Barbie and her team. Preliminary design of the East River Walk is funded by a community development block grant through the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, and administered by the ECDA. So. Okay, so we've had a lot going on in the last year, not just COVID. There's actually been other things going on in the last year. So starting in April with the pre-design, we had a series of exercises that ended in a final outreach event in what was that, September, I believe, on site. Where we met with community members, stakeholders, had one-on-one interviews, and a lot of great information flow to the general public to really show the space and what it could be. From there, we transitioned into the schematic design, preliminary engineering. We had ended that phase with a public open house on Zoom in November, where we had close to 80 residents, public members on that call as well, to showcase the first phase, the first two drafts of the concept. We shifted then into the preliminary design report and a series of additional exercises there, ending with the presentation on Monday evening for our second open house, and then tonight in a future city council presentation, which is TBD at the moment. So we're excited to be transitioning here through the phases, and then hopefully today we'll be able to answer these questions. What is the East River Walk? What will the East River Walk cost? How will we pay for it? When will we build it? And how will we operate it? So obviously very important questions to the city and the community, as well as the Kankakee Riverfront Society. So. All right, so to start, what is the East River Walk? You might have seen the brand kicking around. You might have seen the East Riverwalk name kicking around, but it's the first 3 parcels on the bottom right-hand corner of the screen that you can see at the corner of River Street and South Schuyler. Currently, there's vacant property that the city acquired, and then, of course, the house, the Brandt house that was acquired as well. So it's just over 1 acre along that north bank. We're excited to be able to start there. It's a really manageable piece of property for the first project. Obviously, the Currents of Kankakee brand has really just evolved from the Kankakee Riverfront Implementation Team's marketing committee. We worked through as a marketing committee to really coordinate a brand that becomes a destination, and all of this is derived from that 2018 Riverfront Master Plan that the city adopted. Seems just like a couple years ago now, but a lot has happened. You can see the span of the project in front of you here. We're just underneath that number 1 to the right a little bit, so a little piece of property with a big future ahead of us. And ultimately, the goal is to create an experience, not just a place to go look at the river from a lawn chair, but really have an opportunity for people to gather, to stroll down a trail, enjoy family, friends. Obviously, having a glass of wine from a rooftop isn't too bad either. So I think it's a place that can become a regional destination, not just one for the city of Kankakee's residents, but we've got a lot of future ahead of us. So. Okay, I'm just checking to make sure I know where I'm at. A lot of history on the site. We know, there's a lot of historic elements, the arch, there's the boathouse. We know, too, that it was at one time a brewery. So our goal is to preserve the heritage and the history of this site and also integrate it into the vision for the future. And so with that, I'll turn it over to my colleague, Tim.
All right, thank you, Stacy. So just a little bit about the site. As Stacy mentioned, it's just over 1 acre. There is about 30% of the site is in the floodway. So we know that whenever we do work in the floodway, we need to meet regulatory agency requirements. So those are things that we know what the requirements are. So when we do the design, we'll meet those regulatory issues. There's about 360 feet of street frontage on Schuyler and then on River. Both of those streets are IDOT controlled, so we'll have to work with IDOT on permitting along those areas as well. And there's about 15 feet of vertical drop from the street down to the river level, which actually works to our advantage, even though we have to get accessibility from the street level all the way down. It really does some nice things for views of the river. We have about 300 feet of river shoreline. Again, that's a good amount. It's a nice exposure there at the corner. And again, quite a bit of traffic, 11,000 cars per day. So a lot of people are going to see this site. And as Stacy mentioned, there is the boathouse. I don't know if my pointer's probably not, it doesn't go that far. The existing boathouse that's here, it's kind of tucked in the existing trees at the moment, so unless you're looking for it, you might not see it. And then the house that's on the site is going to be demoed here very soon, so it'll be a clear site aside from the boathouse. So here's, again, just some views of what that space looks like. And so right now, with a lot of the trees there, you don't really realize that this green site, this green space is right there on the river, and you get some great views once those are cleared out a little bit. And we did evaluate the trees that are on the site. There's really nothing there that is specimen quality. So with the new landscape we're going to be putting in, we're not too concerned about the removal of the vegetation there. So if you recall, the city did get a acquisition grant through the DNR, the Oslag program, and there are certain requirements that come along with that. With that grant, the property has to remain public, and the uses need to be consistent with what we applied for in that initial application. Now, we have some flexibility to add things or to do things not exactly the way they were shown, but there are certain representations that we need to meet that are consistent with the Oslag application. We have to start construction by September of 2023, and construction needs to be complete by September of 2025 as a condition of the grant. So, as Stacy also mentioned, back in September, we had a workshop on site, and that two-day workshop, we interviewed quite a few stakeholders. I forget the exact number, but 60, about 60 different stakeholders we had some individual interviews with. And then we did a public workshop on the site, which was really a great event. In addition to that, there have been some individual meetings beyond that. And then we had the public open house and reviewed preliminary concepts. And then just this week, we presented the recommendations, the preferred concept recommendations publicly as well. We're here tonight, and then City Council presentation coming up. So here's the design we landed on, and so I'll go through this. We got quite a few slides, but I'll go through this, and we can answer any questions after we run through this. So generally speaking, you can see the site. This walkway here is the main walkway that goes from the upper street level all the way down to the riverfront level, and there's a number of features that we'll highlight here. So up at the street level, the streetscape along River and Schuyler will be consistent, complementary to what the city has done with other streetscape improvements recently. So that'll be a nice tie-in with the downtown. There's an entry plaza when you come right across the street from the crosswalks that brings you into the site here, and then a parking area up off to the northeast. We want to make sure we maintain open views into the site. We'll go through. Doesn't want to go to the next one. There we go. Okay, seems like we're good now. So this is the view today, or in the fall anyway, of what you'd see coming up to the corner. And then, sorry. If you can. I don't know if it's the distance or we have going. So anyway, here's the view that you would see when all is said and done. So you can see we really open up the views along the river there. You can go to the next slide. So these are just some images of what that might look like when it's constructed. So areas for people to gather, a lot of green space. You can go to the next. And then the area that is in the center there that's circled is this gateway feature that really draws you into the site. And it's actually on an overlook, a cantilevered overlook out towards the river. So it takes advantage of that slope that we talked about. You can go to the next one. And these are some examples of what that could be sculpturally. And we'd like to bring in some local artists when this gets developed to participate in what this could be culturally representative of the community. You can go to the next. Another example of what that could be. And then here's a view looking down along 6 Mile Lake there. Some of the trees were removed, but we'll clear that out even more. Go to the next. And then another view of the corner by Schuyler, where that goes down towards the river there. And then this is the archway, the existing archway that's there by the boathouse. So it's not in the greatest condition, but the concept is to rebuild that over the stairway that goes down to the river. You can go to the next slide. I think that shows that. So that's what that shows there. So that would be a reconstruction of that archway. And we'd have some interpretive signage that tells the story in that location. And then this is the existing boathouse that's there too. We need to spend some more time analyzing this to make sure that we can stabilize it, but the idea is to reuse it so the bottom area could be a storage area, And then if you go to the next slide, I think that shows, it's kind of far away in the sketch, but the top side would be an open-air pergola, a gathering space, another overlook out over the river. And this is a character of what that could look like. Trying to play off stone and wood and things that look consistent with the city of Kankakee. Another example of that. And then here's just some more examples of what things will look like as this gets developed. So you can go to the next slide. And that's that area there. So we're going to be cutting that slope to get down towards the river in an accessible way. And this is an example of what that could look like. Another view then looking from the street level back towards the river. And in the foreground there is the parking lot and the restroom. And then that's the location of what's there now. And so we have some images here to show what this could look like. The thought is we don't want to do just a normal parking lot. We want to do something that could be a shared plaza space. And we'd use permeable pavers, and it could be blocked off for food trucks or different events. So if you go to the next one, you'll see here's some examples of some other projects we've done where we've done a very similar sort of thing. This was a cruise night that they blocked off an area for very similar idea. And then this is the restroom building. The idea here is that, not a big facility. At one point in one of the previous concepts, we had a multi-use building that was in the middle of the site, but the idea was let's tuck this away and make it be functional, but put it out by the street so there's good surveillance. You can go to the next one, and you can see here, and this is an example of what this could look like. So not a big building, but functional. And then this lawn space, when we were out there in September, people really were drawn to this open lawn area, so we've built that into the design. You go to the next one. So this is that space now. And then here's some examples of what that space could be like. Movies in the park, things like that. And then we have a pavilion structure there, something similar to this is what we're thinking. And then down at the river level, there's a dock that is accessible for kayakers and canoeists, and then area for a boat tie-up, a motorboat tie-up, and then a natural beach area where people who want a more traditional approach can pull their kayaks and canoes up on shore there. So there's a view of what that would look like. Then you can go to the next. These are some character images of what that could look like. So again, using a lot of the stone and natural materials that have the character of the city. You can go to the next. And then again, just showing we got the slope, and so that's how the overlook's going to kind of be built right into this area. Examples of what that could look like. And the plan is to get underneath the bridge in a future phase, and then also connect east to the Bradley house along there. And then some examples of how this could look as well. And then from the Schuyler Bridge, and then this just shows these accessible docks here as well. So we're going to clear out this vegetation, rebuild this, and you can see what this might look like here. That's a good example of the ADA accessible dock. All right, so after all that, the big question is what will all this cost? So if you go to the next slide. So we've worked through all the detail on this, and Neil Pigush is part of our team, and he was in on this as well. So based on our experience on similar projects, this is what our best thought of cost is based on the schematic design we just showed. So we have a full breakdown there, but it's about $2.25 million for what you see. And then we are carrying contingencies both for design and bid and during construction. Pretty healthy contingencies, but that's consistent with what we would normally do at the preliminary design level. So all told, it's about a $3 million project. And then there is engineering, design and engineering services to get final permitting and bid document completed, and then also oversee the construction as well. So all told, about $3.5 million. All right.
All right. Good evening, Rick Hitchcock, retired president of Hitchcock Design Group. And this may be the question that you find more interesting, or many of in the community find more interesting than anything else we've presented, is how in the world are we going to pull this off? It's a big investment, but it is doable. I've had the good fortune of working on 19 riverfronts in the Midwest through my career, and the ones that are the most successful each share one common theme, is that they are funded through a public-private partnership without fail. And the reason why that's so incredibly important is so it simply doesn't become a public works project. The community is really deeply invested in it emotionally, financially, and when private sector puts funds in a project like this, it is like a magnet to attract public sector grant funding. The grant funders are always looking for those angles, not just, you know, is it a good project, and is it, you know, shovel ready is certainly important, but is the community, is the private sector ready to put their own money in the project? And when they do, then the outside money flows in. And this is kind of an educated guess, and KRS is busy working on what this might look like for the first project, the East Riverwalk. But we think it's entirely reasonable that 15 to 20% of the project would come through private sector philanthropy. Traditionally, in a project like this, and certainly because the Tiff district exists in part for the funding of the riverfront, we think 40 to 60% could come from Tiff, because the Tiff is so new and development is just being marinated right now and getting ready to maybe some big announcements in the future. Not quite so much on the Tiff side early on, but because ironically and maybe counterintuitively, because of COVID, there is going to be a spectacular amount of state and federal money that is going to be available. And when we get these construction documents ready, we are extremely confident of our ability to get Kankakee its fair share for this project, because it is going to be something that is going to be a stunning gateway to the downtown riverfront, and it is going to absolutely, in turn, drive economic development. There's no doubt in my mind.
Thank you, Rick. So the question, when will we build it? I always joke good things come to those who wait, right? But we don't want to wait too long. If you go to the next slide, we do have obligations to the Oslag grant to start construction by September 2023 and complete it by September 2 years later in 2025. So there's a lot to be done between then and now. But we are making progress. We've been making progress in the last year, starting with the donation by the Franco family of the property to serve as the match for the Oslag grant. And then the city acquiring these properties from Darlene Brandt this fall. So not only are we acquiring land to make this project happen, we have it in hand, we're also creating the brand, the currents of Kankakee, and brand standards. I'm in marketing for a living, and we know how important a brand is. We want to make sure that people recognize it, that when they refer to it, we know exactly when I'm going to the currents of Kankakee where that means, not just on a city level, but on a regional level as well. We've also created the hydro plant lighting plan. We thought an easy win could be something as simple as is throwing lights up on a building that's existing now. It's simple, but it really is an eye-catching difference in what's there now versus what could really be spiced up for the general public to see and look at when they're passing by. Also creates a little enthusiasm for the project in general. We created the East River Walk concept, which Rick and Tim just walked you through. We've met with community organizations. We mentioned the stakeholder event. We had 60 great conversations. We've had strangers and neighbors and friends throughout the community say, hey, how can I get involved? And I want to say all ages as well. We've had 20-somethings say, hey, this is important to me and the reason why I chose to live in this community, and we're looking forward to this. Rick and I actually went on a campaign last fall as well, meeting with, I think, 10 local organizations and boards who are all involved in some capacity, the Community Foundation, Riverside Senior Capital Team, members in the community who are equally as excited as we are about this project. So, and small things like advancing the marketing and then moving forward with creating funding, fundraising, and different operation strategies and committees. So go ahead, Brad. Thank you. I think this might be you, too. Go ahead.
So we're just now at the end of the preliminary design process. So as Stacy mentioned, there's plenty left to do. But the hope here is that if we get started on final design and engineering here in May, really the permitting is going to drive that process. So because we have to get permitting through DNR and the Army Corps of Engineers and IDOT, we're thinking it's about a year process to get through that. We can get the documentation done quicker than that, but the permitting is going to drive that. And Piggish Engineering is our partner on that, and we've already started those conversations. So then once the final design and engineering is done, as Rick mentioned, we're shovel ready. At that point, we'll see if we can get some grant funding once the drawings are approved and shovel ready. But then once construction starts, we're thinking it's about a 9 to 12 month process. And that is going to be somewhat dependent on when we can start construction. Because we're working along the river, it is somewhat dependent on what time of year you start on how you can make forward progress.
Awesome. So how will we operate? Go ahead. Rick mentioned the public-private partnership, and the Kankakee Riverfront Society and the City Capital Team have just started having this conversation too. You know, it's such a big undertaking, but gosh, what an opportunity to come together and work as a public-private partnership. And for all these reasons in front of you, we think this is the best idea, the best concept to move the project forward. Clear community expectations, multiple markets, a lot of great resources, a long-term vision, transformative benefits, and then, you know, the team, right? We're all in this for the better of the community and to move this project forward. Go ahead. So with that, I also want to introduce the Kankakee Riverfront Society. This is the first time coming before the city in any capacity as a formal organization. We were granted our non-for-profit 501c3 status last fall, which is retroactive to the year prior. And we're an organization really that was formed community leaders, city representatives, and Kankakee Valley Park District officials to implement the 2018 Kankakee Riverfront Master Plan. So our goal, obviously, like all of ours, is to make the Currents of Kankakee an extraordinary riverfront experience that will transform the region's image, raise its marketplace appeal, and enhance its quality of life. You can see some of my colleagues there on the bottom. That's from the event that we held last fall. So we have a great group of individuals who are all dedicated to this society. You've heard a lot, you've seen a lot. I'm certainly open the floor for questions, but there are the contact information in front of us for both Tim, myself, and of course invite you to like the Facebook page for the Currents of Kankakee. And yeah, we're so grateful to be here. Here's the final view of the preferred concept, but please ask any questions you've got. Barbie, thanks for having us here, and Brad for setting up all of the tech. And with that, I'll close. Thank you.
You guys have any questions while they're here? Feel free, ask away. It's your time.
Has the Kankakee Riverfront Society, have they brought in or raised any private funding?
We have raised, I don't have an exact number, but I think we're close to $57,000 between in-kind donations and private funds raised, yeah.
And is that going to be pretty important for us to raise quite a bit of money to maybe qualify us for some of the state and federal grants? I mean,
Absolutely.
Get a big chunk of money there.
Yeah, and I think, really one of the goals of the society is to help be that fundraising arm, to help generate the funds for the project. And so, actually at our last board meeting, we are moving forward with creating a fundraising committee to really kick off that capital campaigning. We've laid the groundwork really extensively with a lot of our community members around the area to really start saying, hey, we can build this thing, the sooner the better. We have those private sector dollars and partnerships throughout. So yeah, it's a crucial component. I think it's realistic. I think people are excited about it. So we'll never finish it if we don't start. So that's kind of been my motto.
Any other questions? If not, I want to thank you, Mr. Wilkins, KRS. We do have Project Catalyst update.
Before we do that, though, let's talk about the intellectual property for KRS. So, yeah. So,
And I got on my glasses.
Dave Barron's here to talk about this. You guys should have a copy in front of you of this intellectual property assignment of rights. So, Dave, go ahead. You can.
Thank you, Barbie. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I'm Dave Barron. I am the secretary of the Kankakee Riverfront Society and also have been serving as the legal counsel for Kankakee Riverfront Society. As you just heard, the Riverfront Society, a big portion of what we're going to be doing is the fundraising arm. I think that has always been intended, and that's always been an understanding that we have as the beginning of our public-private partnership really gets formed, that we'd be responsible for fundraising, but also marketing, branding, and what we wanted to do with this very first step before we put together a real memorandum of understanding about what the role of the private and public sectors is with this project, was to take the first step by asking the City Council and first the Economic Development Committee to take action on this, but an assignment of rights as to the currents of Kankakee intellectual property. You can see on the screen right now, to the bottom left, that logo is much more than a logo. That's a brand. It's something that the Riverfront Society and the members of the Kankakee Riverfront implementation team over the last years or so have really put a lot of thought into what this brand is, and not just the brand, but that also comes with brand standards, the coloring, the description, the history behind that, it being the currents of Kankakee, image analysis, marketing analysis. That has been done. That was done under the auspices of a contract that the City of Kankakee entered into with Hitchcock Design Group. The city paid $18,600 to Hitchcock Design Group to develop this brand in conjunction with members of the Riverfront Society and others. The money for the Hitchcock contract came from the Kankakee River Valley Enterprise Zone. The city had applied to the county, to the Enterprise Zone, to get those funds. So no MFT money, nothing from the general fund. But because it was the city who applied for those funds from the county, it technically is the city who owns the brand right now, or at least that's arguably the position. So we're asking, before we launch into a pretty substantial capital campaign, pretty substantial marketing process, that the brand would be turned over to the Kankakee Riverfront Society. We would be the brand owners, we would be responsible for burnishing it, bringing it up. So to that end, that is what the assignment of intellectual property rights that is before you essentially says. One note, we thought it would be appropriate to include in the assignment of property rights a reversionary interest, so that if the Kankakee Riverfront Society ever dissolves or ceases to operate for the purposes of improving, developing, promoting the Kankakee Riverfront, then all that intellectual property would go back to the City of Kankakee. For the lawyers who are playing along, we included in there, because the Kankakee Riverfront Society put in a lot of work and time, we would be releasing any claims as to that intellectual property right as to the city. That way there is consideration in this assignment and it's a valid enforceable assignment. So that's the basis for the assignment as put forward to the Economic Development Committee.
And my apologies for that oversight. So at this time, we do need to take a vote to have this agreement moved to the full council for consideration and implementation. So with that being said, I think we'll do this as a roll call vote. So do I have a motion to accept the assignment of rights as presented?
Second.
Second, and we'll do a roll call. I did speak with Alderwoman Marshall. She would have been here, but she has an injury. So I'll go with Alderwoman Galt.
Aye.
Alderman Crawford.
Aye.
Alderwoman Grant.
Aye.
Alderwoman Lewis.
Aye.
Alderman Cobb.
Aye.
Alderman Tedder is aye. 6 ayes. No nays.
Motion
With
carries.
that, advance.
Thank you so much. So in the coming months, we will be presenting back to you guys as Economic Development Committee how KRS and the city will move forward operationally, really transitioning into KRS having a lot of operational capacity for the riverfront, and so we'll be having more discussions about that. But this was the step that we needed to give them so that they can run their organization with their own branding. So thank you guys very much. Thank you, KRS and Hitchcock Design. Thank you.
Okay, at this particular time, next on the agenda is Project Catalyst Update. Mr. Jeff?
How are you guys? Do you want to come up front while we start this? You can sit like in that chair or however you, yeah. The microphone's right there so that you can talk into it. I'm going to hand out some of the documents for this update, and then I'm going to turn it over to Mike Hoffman to talk a little bit about the scoring. And remember, this is that Tiff policy and procedure that we put into place with the scoring and kind of understanding where we're at so that we can move this project forward and get into this developer agreement drafting phase so that we can bring that contract back to you guys. So I'm going to pass these out. And Mike, do you want to talk a little bit?
Sure. Yeah, can you on first, just so I see them?
Well, that's been passed out. There's quite a bit that has been, as I'll say, cooking in the oven over this last year, and now it's coming into fruition. So I just want to thank the committee and certainly the principal players in this. So with that said, Mr. Hoffman, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Chairman Tedder. So what we did probably a year ago now, was we developed a kind of scoring system for any projects that were looking for incentives from the city so that we'd have a fair basis to evaluate those on. And we actually had a different numbering system for different areas of the town. So there's a separate numbering system for the East Court TIF because those are mostly industrial projects. There's a separate numbering system, a scoring system for downtown because it's a different environment and we're looking for different things. Historic preservation and character and streetscape here, much more focused on jobs on East Court. Meadowview's got a different scoring system. So each area of town has got a different scoring system. and you can get a total of 100 points. We have a committee that kind of reviews these projects, and each kind of scores them differently. So what you're seeing here is kind of the composite score from each of the different committee members, giving up an average score of, in this case, 85 out of 100, which is honestly the highest score we've had for any project that we've reviewed so far, honestly. So it did rate pretty well, and you can see it was pretty strong in a number of different categories. It was fairly strong in the business attraction, retention, and job category, with reoccupying that former Midland Bank building with some of the interesting incubator things that Josh can tell you more about that they're working on in terms of attracting tenants, but we think that's a strong aspect for the project. Strategic plan consistency, we're very excited about this project. It's going to add a lot of people to the downtown area. That's what you really want to see happening. A lot of people on the streets, both living here and working here, and actually possible synergy between their two different elements. So it scored well in that category. Extraordinary cost. It's expensive to do what they're proposing to do, to rehab an existing building and to particularly build a lot of new construction. So there are some unusual costs with this project, and you can see the scoring for the other ones, but those are ones that the major categories. In general, it scored pretty well, and so when we're looking at potential incentives, this would probably be in the higher end of the scale that we would be looking at. Keeping in mind also that this and actually the project you're going to be looking at in the next discussion on the clock tower project are both kind of initial kind of catalytic projects. Typically, when you're looking at implementing a TIF, the first couple projects in the door often do get a higher incentive than other projects later on, because you got to build some momentum. You got to get some very positive progress going on and see some of those projects happen. We think that both of these projects could tend to do that. This one perhaps a little bit more in terms of the scoring system than the other project, but both very good projects and can really kind of kickstart redevelopment in the downtown area and the Riverfront area as well. So that's just a kind of a quick summary of how the group of us scored it. There were 6 of us that scored it, and again, the scores you're seeing here are composite of those 6 people that reviewed the application.
Thanks, Mike. So, Josh, you want to talk a little bit just about an update since the other meetings that we've had about this project, where your team is at, what you're working on right now?
Sure. First of all, can you hear me okay?
You're on, but
I'm on?
yeah,
Okay.
sometimes we can hear you though.
Okay, that works. Well, I'm Josh Jeffers. Our company owns this property. I think I've had the opportunity to meet with many of you already to talk about kind of the overall plan for what we want to do in terms of both the rehabilitation of the former Midland States Bank building, as well as the proposed construction of a new 83-unit market rate apartment building on the surface parking lot adjacent to it. I think probably over the last really just 4 to 6 weeks or so, we've had a lot of really positive momentum on this project, mostly on the business incubator component of it. This is the proposed use that would occupy the former bank building. So a couple of months ago, when we were here and doing presentations about it, you know, a lot of the prospective tenants and users that we were talking about was a little more hypothetical. Just in this short time since we were last here talking about it, we've actually pre-leased about 42% of the office space component of this property, which is pretty remarkable given that we haven't really officially announced the redevelopment of the property, and we don't really even have, you know, that much in the way of marketing materials yet. So we're very happy with just the response that we've seen from the business community. There appears to be a tremendous amount of pent-up demand and interest in this building. And then another just really exciting development is we've had an opportunity to advance our discussions with the Kankakee Community College, with KCC. We had been in discussions with them last year about potentially having them be involved in or operating in some way the proposed culinary use on the ground floor of this building. And we had a really productive, positive conversation with them just a couple of weeks ago, where they expressed some interest in operating not only the culinary component, but actually the full business incubator that would be placed in the lower level of this building. So if you think about this as sort of a 3-story building, the top floor being office, the ground floor being the culinary side of it, and then the lower level being the business incubator, going through those 3, so the top floor, we're at 42% pre-leased, and we're awaiting right now a proposal from KCC is forthcoming for them to basically operate the culinary component of it on the ground floor, as well as the business incubator. So again, a lot of progress just in the last month or two since we kind of last talked with everyone about what it is that we want to do there. One other kind of data point that I wanted to share is in some of our discussions when we were talking about projected rental rates for this property, we were projecting a gross rental rate of about $15 per square foot for the office space. And so far, for that 42% of pre-leasing, we're actually averaging more around $19 per square foot of gross rent, which is also just a really positive development, something we're pleasantly surprised to see because this is a product type that doesn't really exist in the market right now. And we're used to being the canary in the coal mine, for lack of a better term, of testing out new markets and pushing rental rates up a little bit higher. But this would be, so far we're outperforming even our own expectations, which again I interpret to be just a really great sign of how much demand and interest there is out there in the business community for this property. In terms of the apartment component, we're still kind of working through some of the third-party reports with our market consultant. We have engaged our architect to do schematic design for that building. So being new construction, there's quite a bit more design work and engineering that goes into that. But we are tracking to be in a position to have our GMP construction contract signed by the end of September and be in a position to break ground on the property in October, which is roughly in line with kind of the timeline that we had talked about last time. So with that, I'll turn it back over to Barbie.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. So of course we received their TIF application, and Mike just went over kind of the scoring, just reminding you guys of that process. So in front of you, you have the scoring that you guys worked on for policy and procedure, so you remember what goes into that. Also, you have the breakdown of the city team scoring and evaluation, and then you have in there just some highlights of just kind of bullet points of what would go into the TIF agreement. And for this project, we have reached an agreement on these points. But we wanted to bring this to you. The second page is their sources and uses page. So you could take a look at that and you can ask any questions that you may have tonight. Really, it's a chance for some of you to get those questions out there, ask about future plans. This is all time for you guys to do that, so that when we bring in that draft agreement to you in the short future, hopefully, we will have had your opportunity to speak into how that is drafted. So again, I know that you guys have had conversations, so I'm sure you can reach out. If a question comes up later, you can also reach out to me afterwards. But we just wanted to bring all of this to you. Many of you have asked for an update, so Josh is here tonight. So feel free. I'll just kind of quit talking, and then you guys can ask some questions.
Josh, we talked at the meeting about the type of TIF. This is a little different than what we've done in the past. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, that's a great question. So this is a little bit of a different type of a TIF. It's a so-called developer-financed TIF, also known as a pay-go TIF, if you're familiar with that terminology. Basically, what it is the amount of the TIF is funded basically by a loan that we as a developer would go out and source. It's not funded by the city of Kankakee directly. Really rather, it's more approving the mechanism by which we as a developer can get those tax rebates, those incremental tax rebates back for the next 23 years or whatever the life of it is. So as a result of that, we would have to go out and finance it separately. We've got a stable of lenders that we work with that are experienced with TIF loans. What we like about this is, from the city perspective, it kind of removes that financial risk from the city of having to kind of front the costs. And then the other kind of added benefit to us as the developer is that with the changes in the tax reform from, I think, late 2017, TIF grants from cities to, for-profit or private developers, it's a taxable event. So, what we started to see with the more traditional TIF grant process is that we as a developer would lose a lot of that, subsidy in the form of, federal income tax, which kind of defeats the purpose a little bit. Whereas when we structure it as a pay-go TIF, we do still end up paying tax on the benefit as it comes in, but it's stretched out over time, and we're able to get much more of the benefit into the deal as opposed to being lost that way. So we think it's a win-win. It's a structure that we've used with many other municipalities in the past, and it's something that I think would work well here as well. I get that a lot. That's okay. Yes, yeah.
Better understanding for me.
Sure.
So basically, you're going to be financing your own TIF.
That's right.
And then where does the city to come into play with this? Can you lay it out?
Yeah. So basically, the property tax bill for this property is, after the building is completed, that tax bill is going to shoot way up. And so normally, the way this works is, if we came in here and said we'd like $7 million, for example, of TIF funds, the city would issue bonds or somehow, raise the money for that and just give us as a developer that lump sum dollar amount. And then the city's ROI, so to speak, is that big property tax bill that you get every year in perpetuity, basically. The way that we're doing it is that instead, when that tax bill shoots way up, the city would rebate back to us, so it would send back to us basically 75% of that increase in the tax bill each year. So we would be getting the increment back in the form of a rebate, and then we're going to turn around and use that to pay to our TIF lender, basically. So another way of putting it is, instead of the city issuing bonds, we're basically, as a developer, we're going to go out and get a loan. I'd love to issue bonds. Unfortunately, I'm not set up to do that. But we do have lenders that we can work with, and then we're basically going to service the debt on that loan with those tax rebates that come back each year.
Thank you so much.
Sure.
So that's why it's less risky for the taxpayer.
Right.
You don't have a loan, you got it.
Exactly.
That's right. So if the increment fails to materialize, that's really our problem now to work out.
Thank you so much.
Sure.
Mike, do you want to add anything to that? I saw you shaking your head. I didn't know if you...
That's a good, I appreciate the way Josh explained it. It's actually how we're proposing to do it, is put the risk on them. If they don't perform, they don't get the reimbursement. And it's that simple, really. And there's no incentive for him to appeal and drop his tax number too low, because he's not going to get it back if he drops that incentive, right? So it's a good way and a pretty safe way for the city to structure a deal like this.
Mike, do you see any of those, or?
This is kind of how it's going these days. Yeah, most communities will not want a bond for a project. And the other thing he did mention was we're proposing, well, they'd love to get 100% of the increment. We're proposing proposing not to give them 100% because we've got other projects we want to fund, right? We just saw a nice presentation of the Riverfront where they're hoping to get, half the money funded through Tiff. We can't give 100% of the incentive to anybody if we hope to do that. Now, like I said earlier, the percentages we're talking about on these first couple projects are higher than I would generally want to do. I would really generally not want to do more than 50% on any project, but I think we have to over-incentivize these first couple to get some positive momentum going. So that's where the numbers are coming from.
If there aren't any other questions, the next step is it's actually already in the draft with the lawyers, and so we'll just be bringing you guys the draft of the TIF agreement to start going through and working to bring that to City Council for approval as well. So,
yeah, just to add on that. So we've been working with your city attorney to develop a new model TIF agreement, if you will. Some of the other ones that we looked at that the city had in the past weren't the best, to put it simply. So we're creating a new kind of model that we can use for new projects going forward, and I think that'll be helpful for the city in the long run.
Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
What's the timeline on that, do you know, or is that still just fluid?
we already started drafting it. So if all goes well, I mean, I could have it to you at the April 22nd meeting just for first review.
One thing I did want to point out in this, what Mr. Jeffers them are doing, and they are to be commended. This is something that the administration has actually been working towards, and I see it in here, and that is 25% minority representation will be involved, and that's great. I mean, we've never had anything like that. And so it means that we're going to have local residents from the city of Kankakee or the surrounding communities involved in this community, in this project, which is great. So we're talking about 80 apartments, market rate. I'm excited. I got my seatbelt on. And also the incubator. And thank you for investing in the city of Kankakee. You and your company. We're looking forward to this. This is big stuff here. This is real big stuff. Yes, Mr.
Just one other thing to add to the conversation. I've already had a good conversation with Josh's partner, Brian, about the zoning process, but they will have to go through a conditional use process for the residential piece of this thing. Everything they do in the office is already permitted, and there's no issues with that, but they will have to deal with the zoning issue on the apartment complex.
One last thing. I'm glad you mentioned that part at the end, and I saw it, but I don't know if I appreciate it. We should lead with that. I mean, that's a big deal.
Oh, it's
on this one right here.
It's a goal that we're...
The second section of text.
Yeah, it's a goal that we're shooting for with all of our TIF agreements, especially since workforce is a big component of TIF, eligible expenses, and so you'll see that also in our next big request as well. So, yeah.
We're very excited for it. Yeah.
Making it hard for us to say no.
Any other questions? All right, we'll move forward with the draft, and we'll be back with you guys and hopefully move this forward. There's obviously more moving parts to this, so we'll be talking about this pretty much every week. So thank you guys. Thanks for making the trip down here. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thanks, everyone. Take care.
Okay, next on the agenda, we're doing pretty good with time. There's a lot to digest. Okay, no problem. Next on the agenda is Mr. Bennett in regards to the clock tower rehab project. So with no further ado, we present to you the one and only, Mr. Jeff Bennett.
That was a good intro. So in front of you, you have the TIF request that we have been talking about with them. We have not reached an agreement, but what's in front of you is what the city had presented to them. We're still working with them. This is a big project, just as important, and so we really need your feedback speaking into this rehab project at Clock Tower that is also going to spur growth and interest in our downtown area. And if you remember, Mr. Doug Baum invested here a few years ago and purchased the Clock Tower in the PNC building. But I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Bennett so that he can talk a little bit more about those investments, and then just an update about Clock Tower rehab and their leasing efforts that are going on well there, and then get your feedback into this project as well. So Mr. Bennett, please.
Thank you. Doug Baum would have been here, but yesterday when he called me, he was on the golf course in Palm Springs. So he got noticed late and had a planned trip. So we talked yesterday or last night. And so I'm pleased to be here. I'm really pleased to be following Josh, because he does a wonderful job describing tax increment financing. And so, and I think it's part of the momentum that exists downtown. And I'm really pleased to be part of that momentum. As you know, Baum Development acquired the Clock Tower, the PNC Bank building, and is acquiring other real estate also downtown Kankakee. And I think those acquisitions are part of the confidence and momentum downtown. The Clock Tower and PNC were this close to foreclosure, and then you would have been dealing with Harris Bank, and so they stepped up. The city's been a part of that. He's had confidence in the city and the investment that he made. We too have found good leasing activity. Since the acquisition, there's 5 tenants that have come into space there at good targeted rates that we've had for that building. I think this next phase of renovation, we look forward to seeing get kicked off. We understand the pay-as-you-go tax increment financing concept, and Baum is capable of financing that TIF note as well. Similarly, we think there's untapped entrepreneurship in Kankakee, and the first floor of the Clock Tower lays out nicely to copy something Doug's done that received article in the New York Times about what they did in Chicago with some of the entrepreneurship concepts that they have. So an incubator business center on the first floor there. I think too, I was talking to David Barron in the back. We commit to the 25%, and it's important. I think there's another step there, and Doug's prepared to say, I'll even sit with you and figure out where do you find these 25%. I think that's the real issue at hand. And has had some experience investing in that minority company that might exist in a startup phase because they need a boost to get started. So in one of the most recent calls, we had that kind of conversation, and he wanted me to state that. We're close to finishing this and excited about finishing it. We've had quality conversation with all involved. We haven't agreed with the scoring necessarily on our side, but we're close. So it's, I think that's the final step to enter into an agreement and get started. So we are pleased to be here tonight to answer any questions you might have and continue that momentum to get the agreement completed.
Thank you, Jeff. Mike, do you want to talk about just the scoring process for this one?
Well, the scoring process was the same, right? I think that the differences were, this one scored a little bit lower overall. Some of the reasons for that in general, I think, is the other project does have a significant residential piece. This one doesn't. And quite frankly, the city's just recently spent quite a bit of money on streetscape enhancements right in front of this property. So they're already done, and the money's already been spent, so we couldn't score them too highly for that particular thing. Certainly, they gave them a 5 out of 5 on historic preservation. It's an old building that's got lots of character and lots of charm, and continuing to reinvest in that makes a lot of sense. And certainly, it scores well on the job front because it's an office space and we'll be adding a lot of employment downtown, and I think it is certainly consistent strategically with what the city wants to do downtown, so it scored well in that category as well. The categories where the applicant, I guess, thought they should have probably scored a little bit higher was in green building components. They are going to be doing some LED lighting on the project that will enhance energy efficiency, so that is a plus. And there were a couple of other categories where they thought we underscored them a little bit. So bottom line is they're looking to increase the percent of reimbursement from the Tiff a little higher than what we had suggested here. So that's the negotiating point, really. I think everything else is pretty agreeable. It's just that maximum or that percentage of the reimbursement of the Tiff.
Thank you. So I'm just going to open this up so that we can have a conversation with Jeff about this project. You can ask some questions. I do have some pictures, Jeff, from Doug, so I'll put those up here, and we'll just have a discussion. Again, whatever your feedback is, whatever your questions are, we'll take those back to the city team too, and especially trying to finalize and close this gap that we're having. So I'll just open it up.
What's the thing with John?
Yeah.
Jeff, is the use basically the same for the buildings, or would just be an upgrade?
Yeah, we, some years ago, it seems, when we were trying to look at solutions to the vacancies at PNC and Clock Tower, thought maybe there needed to be a residential consideration for one of the two, and that hasn't proven to be the case. We found satisfactorily, we found tenants will have, the first floor business center idea, and it's something that they've had experience in as a part of it. We were able to retain the tenants. That's pretty important. We've got Aqua there. It's a big employer downtown, in one of the acquisitions, it's on the PNC. I think we'll get another tenant to solidify office tenancy for the space.
How much space of that building is about space now?
A whole floor, so it's about 10,000 square feet. Yeah, so this same developer bought Clock Tower and the PNC. So they own the PNC Bank building as well.
I just wanted to ask a question for clarification. Mr. Bennett, the Clock Tower, as I recall a few years ago, it was involved in, I think the city, that building benefited from TIF agreement, was that correct?
I wasn't involved in.
Okay. I think it was. I'm not certain. We'll have to find out.
No, it was.
It was?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, thank you. Any other questions, comments from this committee?
What's the timeline? You guys have a set timeline yet, or not?
We're waiting to, we learned from Josh, so we knew how to ask for 100% of the. So we too asked for 100%, and in some instances that's been the case. So we're really saying, it's a $3.2 million total project. There's about $1.6 million that we think makes sense for just TIF eligible expenses. It's pay as you go. So we're hoping to recover, through the increment, that investment, the more percentage we get, we pay that back to that developer who's financing it quicker. We understand in the conversations that the city's looking to take dollars from not take dollars, but some of that increment, there's other priorities in your plan. So we're looking at
One of those things, when we created the TIFs, is that we created purposes for the TIFs. That was a big part of the discussion that you guys had in these new formation of TIFs, that so much money would go back to the riverfront for infrastructure, things like that. So we're just trying to keep the balance of what the purpose is of the TIF and also supporting the developer in their projects as well. So, yeah. Go ahead.
Okay. I'm just making sure I understand. So this is just for the clock tower, and I'm assuming there'll be another request maybe for the PNC building. And there's only so much in the, we probably can't give away the move. But I do understand getting these first initial projects rolling for the momentum, I think, is important. But this is for the clock tower, but probably be another. Okay.
Yeah. Doug, I don't want to speak for Jeff and Doug's team, but they are here to stay, and they are making other investments too. So yeah, there will be some other application requests coming through. So. Brett has a question.
I have a question for Mike. So this percentage of their TIF, that's coming from any changes in their property taxes that will be going to the TIF or their existing property taxes?
Yeah, no, we're kind of proposing to look at each of these projects independently, really, if you will. So he's going to be, we're going to be tracking the increment that we generate off of his property. The assessed value right now, in theory, is fairly low because there's a little high vacancy rate. So the assessor takes that into consideration. If that building is fully occupied, the amount of taxes they're paying is going to raise, right? It's going to go up, and we're going to use that increase to help fund the renovations that they're going to be doing on a project through the TIF.
Thank you for that clarification.
Any other feedback? Whatever you say is going to be very helpful to us as we try to bring this home. All right.
Thank you.
So moving forward, Jeff will be in touch with your team again, and we'll get together soon. So thank you so much for being here. I appreciate it.
Okay. All right, our next item on the agenda is the approval of the prior minutes from February's meeting.
You should have had them in your email.
The director has them pulled up if any of us need to review them. Okay, I will entertain. Has everyone had a chance to look at the minutes? Okay, great. I'll entertain a motion to accept the minutes from February's meeting. Who motion? Oh, okay. And who, is there a second? Thank you, Kyle. Okay. It's been motion and second. There's no dollar amount. So all in favor? Aye. Aye. Those opposed? None. So ayes have it. Minutes are approved. And at this time, I'll turn it over to the lady who doesn't sleep.
Thank you for that. Really, you have my director's report. All of our reports for ECDA are online too, so general public can find them and read them. So I don't think we need to go through the whole report. You've seen the bulk of the work that we've been spending time on. We should present it tonight. I do want Brado to give you a brief update about the outdoor dining, bounce back business, and then also our inquiries that we get every month. So I'm going to turn over to Brad, and then have Mike Hoffman give you a tip update.
Yes, so Bounce Back Kankakee, the business program, we have allotted approximately $190,000 so far, and we still got a little bit left in our initial round to finish up with, and we're hoping, we can maybe put some more money into the program in the future to continue helping our businesses recover from this pandemic. New inquiries into our office, interested in different developments in Kankakee, whether it's looking for buildings or just wanting to have more information. We've had 6 since the last committee meeting, 2 in the East Court area, 1 just 5th Avenue, just south of Meadowview, 2 in the downtown Riverfront area, and 1 actually what I'm calling the South Riverfront area. And then the outdoor dining program, I've been visiting our small business, privately owned restaurants and discussing with them about the potential to expand the downtown outdoor dining program citywide. Collectively, everyone is very enthusiastic and wants to participate, and I just have a few more restaurants to finish visiting, and we're just going to start now tallying numbers of what the cost could look like to make that come forth and how we may go forward funding that program in relationship with the businesses too.
Thanks, Brad.
Yeah.
Mike, do you want to give us something about downtown TIF?
Sure. We've got the public hearing for the new downtown TIF for April 5th at 5:15. We have sent out a lot of notices to everybody that's in the TIF, as well as everybody within 750 feet of the TIF. We have had a joint review board a week or 2 ago. The Joint Review Board voted positively, so they recommended approval of the TIF. They were all comfortable with that. They did ask for one potential change, and just in terms of the language in the document, they would like a restriction put on transfer of funds between this TIF and the other adjacent TIFs in the last 5 years, that we couldn't transfer money out without reviewing it with the Joint Review Board and getting their approval first. It was a request. You don't have to do that, but that was a request by the Joint Review Board that they brought forward. But otherwise, they were supportive of the project with no other concerns. They understood the purpose and the need for it, and were no objections. I've only really had one resident call so far on this, which was a property owner, of course, just outside the boundaries of the area that we had mapped out, asking that they wanted their property included. We've had this discussion before, and we really can't modify the boundary at this point easily. And there were some clear reasons why this particular property wasn't included. So I can explain it to you individually if you'd like to, but other than that, I think it's moving forward in a positive vein. And I guess I will mention the first project we talked about, Project Catalyst, probably doesn't happen if we don't approve this TIF, because it would be in this new TIF district. So there is a correlation there. So,
PNC too.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mike. Land bank update, the county board did approve it on March 9th at their meeting. Next steps are to appoint the representatives from the county and from the city to be on the new entity's board of directors. And then once that board has been assigned, then those people can get together and start the operational documents and policies and procedures, and start spending that money, working with the state, which I don't, Tuska is the actual land bank consultant for the state for that program, so we'll have Mike Hoffman still with us in the land bank world for that. So I'm looking forward to that. All the operational documents actually have been drafted, so hopefully that will help the organization have something to start with, so that they can go through and start picking them and putting them into place, so that we can get them moving faster. We have property too that we purchased that we will be able to give them, so that they have starting inventory as well. So that'll be coming up in the next few months. So that's the one day update. Anything you want to add on that?
Nope, you're good.
Okay. Anybody have any questions for me? Thanks, Chairman.
So, it's quite a bit for us to digest in an hour and a half, but I think this has been an incredible journey for this committee, I know when we started, we were talking about economic development, and now here we are right in the midst of it. And, you know, there's projects getting ready to take place that's going to rival our operating budget. And what's so great about it is it's private investors coming in. So, I mean, it's a no-brainer. We really shouldn't have a problem. I mean, they're putting their money where their mouth is, and I think that this is going to be great for the continued development of the downtown area and the Riverwalk. I wanted to see if there was any alderman comments. I know that Alderwoman Lewis, she doesn't like to say a lot, but she's behind the scenes doing a whole lot of stuff. And so the floor is open for anyone who wants to have any alderman and alderwoman comments. Are there any? Mike, I know you have. Okay, well, if that's the case, then we'll move on to the next item, which is a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All right, there's